Hey there, welcome back to the show. You've often heard me say, don't run a restaurant, run a business and build a powerful brand. So this episode is all about the foundational elements, the ins and outs of building a super strong marketing strategy and brand from a marketing and brand building expert. I'm speaking with Elizabeth Brasch. She is the executive vice president of a 50-year-old concept called Mellow Mushroom, growing to 160 plus stores. Really powerful story. All about brand building and what has launched them to the top and kept them ahead of the competition, something we all need to do in our restaurants. You've heard me talk about the Menu Profit Accelerator. It's a tool that lets you analyze menu profit and then how you can find out where you're making money, losing money every single day, and really dial in a menu for maximum profit. It's all at restaurantrockstars.com. Don't forget our YouTube channel, and you can also subscribe and listen for free on all the major podcast players. Please leave us a review. If you like what you're hearing, it'll help other operators and hospitality professionals find us. If you have any restaurant questions, reach out to me, Roger, R-O-G-E-R, at restaurantrockstars.com. Now, on with the episode.
You're tuned in to the Restaurant Rockstars Podcast. Powerful ideas to rock your restaurant. Here's your host, Roger Bodwin.
Quality and caring still matter. Where the almighty dollar rules, Lily's Fresh Pasta refuses to compromise. Lily's is a time-honored, proud tradition and family business passed down from mother to son. Lily and Antonio continue to produce a complete line of homemade pastas using only 100% non-GMO, high-quality Italian unbleached wheat, grade A eggs, and naturally filtered water. That's it. No preservatives, no fillers, just the best product. I've tasted Lily's Fresh Pasta many times, and they're always molto bene. Ask your local food service representative or call Antonio directly at 603-818-2100.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Restaurant Rockstars Podcast. Elizabeth, welcome to the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm glad to have you here. You are a branding and a marketing guru, and branding and marketing is so important, the strategy, the ins and outs, and it has such to do with new and repeat business, but more importantly, building loyalty with your guests. But it's a whole big thing. So I want to dive into that. Now, Mellow Mushroom, 50-year anniversary. That's absolutely huge. How long have you been with the company?
I have been with the company formally now for going on 11 years. And I started it currently with the marketing department. I started in a coordinator position 11 years ago, which is hard to believe how much time has really flown by. And then prior to that, during my much younger years, I had some short stints as an intern in operations and some internships in the marketing department over a few different summers.
Fantastic. Now, I spent a lot of time on your website, and I was really blown away by the creativity and the colors and the vibe and the aura of the whole thing. But I want you to describe it. What is the zeitgeist of Mellow Mushroom, and what do you hope to present to your guest when they walk in the door, and what's the experience?
Zeitgeist of Mellow Mushrooms. I think you're the first person to ask me the question exactly like that. Mellow Mushroom it's a really fascinating brand to be a part of, to work on. The branding itself it's really compelling and challenging to work on in the sense that we're very unique in operating in a chain capacity, but we have this high level of unique creativity that's in all of our restaurants. So at the core, Mellow Mushroom is really its most kind of successful applications and distillation of the brand. It's really this complementary but really unique juxtaposition of this creativity, psychedelia, mellow vibe, very creative live and let live mentality, juxtaposed with this very rigid and consistent sense of pride around food quality, experience, excellence in the ingredients category. So I like to say we're equal parts like mellow mood, very relaxed, but we take certain parts of the brand very seriously and don't waver in those aspects. So it's this nice counterbalance, if you will, in terms of the overall guest experience.
Now, I understand you were instrumental in the rebrand not so long ago, but let's go
Mhm.
back to the origins of this company. 50
Yeah.
years ago, it was started by college friends, right?
Yep.
And
Mhm.
Mellow Mushroom had this 70s psychedelia vibe, and there's still a lot of that, but it seems like you've taken it into a more contemporary place. Is
Right.
that true?
Right. We specifically leaned into a concept that's described as neutro. Neutro is this really great combination of what's best about a brand or a mood or an artwork or a concept that is retro and celebrated retro combined with new and modern. So as we think about cultivating the Mellow Mushroom brand and how we want to drive it forward while also honoring our foundation, our history, and also honoring what is very much still an important part of the brand today. Going back to that juxtaposition that I mentioned initially about what's rooted in a lot of the thinking with our marketing strategy and the store design and the concepting, that's very much when we started working on the rebrand, that concept was very central or core to the thinking because one of the very unique but fruitful challenges on embarking on a rebrand, not only a rebrand for a company that's existed for 50 years, but also it was the first ever rebrand that Mellow Mushroom had ever invested in our 50-year history. So not only is it 50 years, it was also our first time making an investment like this. And when you have a brand that's so deeply rooted in creativity and the celebration of artwork, and there's certain critical non-negotiables in terms of menu quality and food quality, and there's a lot of aspects that are so embedded in the culture and so embedded in the beloved guest sentiment about what Mellow Mushroom is. It's certainly a very unique and compelling challenge to try to incorporate what is most beloved and special and necessary about the brand, also coupling that with what are perhaps some new aspects or more modernized aspects of the brand that would help position us for future success.
Excellent ideas. Awesome. Let's talk about a strategy, perhaps, and any advice you could give an operator, because I'm a big believer in running a business and building a brand versus just running a restaurant. Anyone can open a
Right.
restaurant, but being successful is incredibly challenging, and branding is a huge part of that. And getting people to really buy into that brand and feel like they're a part of that brand. But there's so many things. There's colors, there's fonts, there's all these different things, logos. Where would you
Mhm.
start and what advice would you give for someone who really wants to either rebrand or literally
Right.
create a brand from scratch?
I think, first of all, I would start with, especially if you're new to branding or marketing or the process, or maybe your area of expertise is in operations or in a different aspect of the business. I think in considering a rebrand, the most important thing is to first understand what branding really is. Branding is not just a logo. You have your tools in your brand kit, which include a logo, include colors, include fonts, include all of those necessary they're literally tools, if you will, but those are not your brand. Your brand itself is frankly what the guests and the consumer think your brand is. Your brand is the societal sentiment of what people think about, how they feel, what their overall impression is when they encounter your brand, think of your brand, interact with your brand, purchase from your brand. Your brand is 100% what the guest believes that it is. So as brand marketers, but not just brand marketers, anyone who's working on behalf of the brand, when you are an operations leader at the company, you're one of the most critical and important people involved in branding because you are largely responsible for creating what that guest experience is. So all of us in one way or another, whether or not we're directly marketers, are responsible for cultivating brand sentiment. So I think having that just basic understanding of what you're doing and how broadly it applies to the whole business, that's the most important thing. Because when you think of it just as a logo, it's going to fall flat because right
Uh-huh.
from
Yes.
there's a misunderstanding. So once you have that team alignment, I can share a little bit about the process that we did because I think it was really effective and it was collaborative and we're thrilled with the results. When we first started working on a rebrand, we engaged with a design agency, one in particular, Known Unknown. They have the gentleman that runs that agency previously was the global CD for Coca-Cola. You can go a lot of different routes with how you choose who you work with. We worked with this individual in particular because he had strong history in working with brands with a lot of heritage, like Mellow Mushroom. So first, you need to make sure that the outside vendors or agency partners that you're going to connect with, in terms of their experience and their methodology and their approach, that it really aligns with the needs of your company. Then from there, we collaborated. We got all the major players in the company. We had people from accounting, administrative assistants, receptionists. We had franchisees from the store level, not just people in marketing, because you need to have all different kinds of perspectives in your organization coming into the initial ideation session. And it was collaborative, and we got so many great perspectives when you brought in folks from different departments. So we engaged in a 2-day workshop where we worked again with some consultants that helped us just through the thinking process to get back to the basics of what are we trying to achieve? What are we trying to represent? What do our products mean in the minds of consumers? What are we trying to solve for? So we really went back to the basics initially and just ideating on the brand instead of thinking of it as this like super abstract kind of idea. You're thinking of it as like a friend, as a living person, as a familiar relationship that you want to cultivate. And you're trying to establish, okay, what is it? What does this brand mean today? How does it exist and work in the marketplace? What are some things that are working really well for us? And what are some aspects of the brand that are maybe undersold or underperforming or misrepresented that we would seek to improve or resolve as a part of this kind of transitional effort? So once we had that session, that was a multi-day workshop. We had a lot of really great kind of rooted findings out of that. And then from there, we actually began the formalized design process. And we also took a little bit of a unique approach to that too. We didn't just work with one designer or an in-house designer at that specific agency. We actually articulated a brief based on the results of this workshop. And then we deployed that brief to 15 different artists around the world, some of which actually had never dined at a Mellow Mushroom, had never even heard of it. And we asked them initially to create a singular artistic expression of what, based on the brief and their knowledge of the brand and overall understanding, a singular artistic expression that to them represents Mellow Mushroom. And I think what an exercise like that for us really did is it removes the inherent bias that you have when you work on the brand every single day.
You're too close to it.
Right. You're too close to it.
Love
And
it. Yes.
you're assuming that people receive the brand in a certain way, which
Right.
this process and the interaction with these artists, it really helps, I think, uncouple maybe some false beliefs or pretenses that you might have about your brand, or things that guests recognize or receive or they don't, or what elements of the brand are really beloved and what are not. So that was the initial process that helped inform directionally where we wanted to go with the creative exploration. And then from there, it was a multi-month process. So without going into all the nitty-gritty details, it was really from there that we defined which specific elements we wanted to lean into for the iconography and the development of that and the logo development. And then we iterated on that numerous times. And when we had something that we really felt was the right transition from our prior logo, but also positioned us for the future and would be something that our guests, specifically our loyal guests and new guests, would both alike really appreciate. Then from there, we did take it to some in-store research, specifically consumer and guest intercepts. And actually, as a marketing leader, that was one of the most productive investments of my time in actually attending those guest interviews. And I spoke to over 200 guests personally in small groups for 30 minutes at a time. We weren't even talking about the food. We were just talking about their overall perception of the brand, what they love about the art, what they think of when they think of Mellow Mushroom, what do they want from Mellow Mushroom from a experience and design and environment standpoint. We also, in that process, socialized this new logo to those guests to just get their feedback and hey, what's the word that comes to mind when you look at this? Does this identify as Mellow Mushroom to you? And so those conversations were so fascinating because there were certain things about the brand that guests spoke about that were so consistent, regardless of gender, age, demographics. So you're really able to like cut through to the truth in terms of how people think of you. And when you're
Common threads I'm hearing and relevance, because it was important,
right,
not just to what are we today, we want to make sure this is
right,
timeless and it's got legs and it's going to keep going and we can stay relevant with different
right,
demographics as maybe our core customer ages
right,
out, we keep getting younger people into the
right.
brand. I'm hearing all those things from you. That's great.
It was
Huh.
fascinating. And I think for those listening, because I know people are working on a variety of budgets when you're thinking about doing this for your own
Yes.
concept. So you can do the same methodology, I think, and right size it based on your budget and what your business capabilities are. But the one of the things that I think has really changed in the industry, particularly in the last 10 years and has changed about the approach to creative, is that branding was previously thought of as it was a very flat approach in the sense of you would say, okay, these are your colors, these are your fonts, these are your, in our case, patterns, these are your logos. And these are the specific rules and how you can use those elements. And you don't break away from those rules. And this is the unchanging like prescription to if you're going to create a graphic design or an ad or whatever that may be for the brand, this is what you can do and not do. And I think it's a trend in the industry today, but it's especially relevant to a brand like Mellow Mushroom is what we developed as a part of the branding was not just the tools themselves, but also completely rethinking the briefing process and the creative approach and defining which aspects of the brand should have some creative latitude and liberties and which aspects of the brand identity should be more formalized and unchanging. So some examples of that is Mellow Mushroom, when you look at the 50-year history, for many decades, we never produced the same sign on a building twice. We had different signage in all of our restaurants. And for many years, in a large part of our history, that really co-created a lot of our success because particularly around the time that millennial spending power entered the marketplace, there was a period of time where you saw a sense of rejection, of sameness, and of chains and things looking, I call it corporate rubber stamp, things looking overly corporate, if you will. So for a large part of the brand's history, we did not have a reputation as a chain, and we very much celebrated that. We are still franchised today, nearly all franchise and locally owned restaurants. So it was very representative of our business partners and our franchisees, and also the way that we design our restaurants because they are all snowflakes and no two look exactly the same. But when we engage in the branding and the guest research, what we understand, particularly as Gen Z spending power has entered the marketplace, that has changed things. COVID really changed things. The fact that you're now hit with 1,000 times more advertisements today than you were even 5 or 10 years ago. So people are
Yes.
overwhelmed. They are being hit with such a waterfall of information and consumption at every turning point in their day. There is in the marketplace this renewed sense of desire to have clarity on your brand and for the experience to be seamless in that aspect. So what that means for Mellow Mushroom, when you think about Nutro and you think about how do we combine what is the best part of our legacy while also solving for the future, we really determined in this, we call it a freedom within framework approach. So we've now established what is a healthy framework for the brand. And you have certain things like signage that we're working on updating signage system-wide across all of our restaurants. So you have that repetition and recognition and consistency for guest wayfinding and also to help increase the efficacy of our branding and advertising efforts. But then you have certain aspects of the experience that our guests have told us directly, and we know the murals on the walls in our restaurants that should be unique to locations. We should work with and continue to work with real up and coming artists that this is what they do for a living and support the creative economy and like really be a part of that on a more individualized basis and have those special, unique moments in every single Mellow Mushroom location that are curated and certainly the very opposite of any sort of repetition that I'm describing. So that's two extreme examples of the spectrum. And we have a lot of our marketing and branding activities that sort of fall in between some of those ranges that I just described. But I think if anyone's listening and they're trying to think about how to approach branding, the first recommendation that I would make just in terms of your actual go-to-market strategy is to not apply a flat approach and really think about which aspects of the experience should drive consistency and that will be received positively by your guests, and which aspects of the experience need to continue to provide that newness and that excitement and be open to a lot more kind of rapid change and involvement.
Restaurants sell tons of fried food and your customers love it, but the hassles, hazards, and mess of fryer oil, cleaning hoods, and all that grease, well, you can forget all that with Restaurant Technologies. They deliver your oil, filter it, monitor usage, collect and recycle your waste cooking oil. Their AutoMist system automates your hood and flue cleaning, eliminating the fire risk. As a Restaurant Technologies customer, you'll also save 10 to 15% in your insurance premiums. Plus, get a bonus for new customer referrals. Get started at rti-inc.com or call 866-399-3639. Listen, don't lose birthday business to your competition. People celebrate birthdays 7 days a week. The check averages are high, and when they have fun in your place, they'll come back again. Talk to my buddy Dyson. He's an operator also, just like you and me, but now he runs a done-for-you birthday club. Go to jointhebirthdayclub.com/birthdayrockstar. It's a piece of cake. So I'm hearing consistency, but I'm also hearing respect the local community you're in and somehow integrate that with the messaging and with the brand strategy of your stores so that the guest experience is consistent, but the vibe, same vibe, but yet difference, nuances about local history or something that's important to that particular city or town that a store is in. That's really fascinating stuff too. Let's pivot a little bit and let's talk about the guest experience and what you want to do, because again, consistency must fall into the guest experience, but there's a certain flavor of this community. But overall, how do you curate these guest experiences that are memorable, that, you know, keep you separate from the competition and make you stand out?
For Mellow Mushroom, it's definitely a multi-sensory experience. So if we think about it, I'll describe a couple
Pizzadelic, right? You use that term, pizzadelic.
Yeah, a very pizzadelic experience.
Yes.
So in terms of how we provide this multi-sensory kind of compelling, like really fun aspect of the brand, like first of all, dining at a Mellow Mushroom is fun, and it's fun inside the four walls. And it's also fun if you're doing an online order or a delivery order outside the four walls, because all the touch points of the brand, even everything from our packaging, I think is highly differentiated compared to what other concepts. The packaging has that cool psychedelic art. So experience and the ethos of the Mellow Mushroom experience far extends outside the restaurant. But when we think about delivering consistency, it starts first at the core of our product, which is, of course, our menu. And we have a fantastic menu, fantastic dough that's super unique to the brand, that's been the same unique recipe with 5 ingredients since 1974. Great quality ingredients at that. We are the own in-house producers of our dough. It's coveted, sacred to the brand. And the dough is the pinnacle of the menu mindset, but we apply that same sort of mentality to menu innovation and providing a great experience across the whole menu, whether it's a cocktail, whether it's a new LTO pizza recipe, whether it's, we call our appetizers munchies. So whether it's like a delicious.
I get that. Sure.
So we deliver great consistency through the menu at its core to the experience. So even though, like I've talked a lot about the unique murals and things that we're doing differently from store to store, one of the core tenets of the experience that is consistent is that menu and those same great items that you can experience from location to location. You love the Holy Shiitake pizza. That's your favorite. You're going to be able to get it at any Mellow Mushroom that you go to. So
does the menu change, Elizabeth, very often? Or is it you got your rock solid, consistent choices that have been a part of the history of the company, but then you also have does the only thing that changed the LTOs, or do you R&D and bring in new menu items occasionally? How does that work?
So we're actually very focused on working on some menu ideation right now, and we are rethinking how we might want to handle more rapid innovation and changes in the future. So I think going forward, what you may see on the Mellow Mushroom menu in terms of changes and updates may look a little different than if you were to compare to the last 50 years.
Yes.
But we actually have an LTO that we're launching at the end of April that we are super, super excited about. It is, I can only give a little hint as to what it is, but I will say it is
Okay.
the perfect marriage of two items that I think most of America loves. Pizza being one of them. The second item will be a surprise. But so we are delivering an LTO that includes several different items on the menu that will launch at the end of April. And then we're also looking at our menu from a simplification aspect too. We have 50 years of history. We have some items on the menu that we're going to look at and say, is there a better way to deliver something in this category? Should we look at changing this item out to something else? Where can we look at certain things that are maybe underperforming that we may want to remove from the menu as part of simplification efforts? We're taking a closer look at all the categories, everything on the menu. And if there's something that's not working for us as an organization or from a sales or operational standpoint, we'll consider removing it. From an innovation standpoint, we are working on not only developing an LTO pipeline, but also how we react to menu hacks, trends that are happening on social. How do we deliver menu innovation and new food news? And maybe it doesn't always need to go on the menu. If there's something that our guests are telling us on TikTok that they really love, hey, the secret is dip your crust in this amazing sauce. We can offer that as a menu hack without it having to be physically printed on the menu. So there's more ways to have food news and menu innovation that don't necessarily involve the traditional modalities. And I think particularly when you work with Gen Z and a younger audience that's making a lot of their selections, they're using TikTok as like a Google search bar. That's a big opportunity to be timely and more of the moment when you think about delivering new options to your guests.
Are you thinking TikTok is the place to be for sure for restaurants to really reach their audience consistently? Are there other platforms you use, Instagram and what would you suggest?
Yeah, we use it all. In the case of Mellow Mushroom, we are a very multi-generational concept. So we don't target just specifically a younger audience. Of course, we have fans all across the spectrum. So when we think about our advertising efforts, we tee those up and deliver differently on platforms based on who the guest is that's using that platform and the type of content they want to receive. In my case, I'm a millennial. I respond differently to content than Gen Z in some aspects. And I'm a heavier user of Instagram, which directly fits with the millennial demographics. We're certainly not focused on one demographic alone. We serve families, like I said, very multi-generational. So we're very focused on serving up content that is more individualized and relevant to the audience that's on that platform.
Let's talk about your beverage program, because I know that beer traditionally goes with pizza, but you're not your typical pizzeria. You are a unique sit-down, full-serve restaurant that has soup and has a diverse, it's pizza-centric, of course, but you also, besides beer, you've got curated cocktails, you got mocktails, you're recognizing the emerging huge amount of people that are now health conscious and they're drinking mocktails, even though they want to feel like they're drinking a cocktail. Right. You're curating unique signature beverage items as well for these stores. And that's very profitable for you, as the bar should be.
Yes. The bar is an excellent complementary attachment point to the brand. It's of huge importance when we think about dine-in and driving dine-in sales, because especially as we've seen off-premise, we're not unique like many other concepts that with COVID, there was a strong kind of shift that I don't think anybody believes that society's going back. People ordering third party, online, off-premise more than ever. But the bar is still one of those great parts of the experience that primarily you can only get in store. And for consumers, you can get a great craft cocktail that maybe you wouldn't necessarily make yourself at home. So it is one of the key differentiators. When we think about the Mellow Mushroom bar, we were originally, when you look at the history, we were pizza and beer, of course, no surprise there. Pizza and beer is tale as old as time.
Yeah, it's evolved so much since then.
Yeah, absolutely. And in one of the ways it's evolved was Mellow Mushroom historically was a place where you could get craft beer and really interesting local craft beers when that used to be widely unavailable or very hard to find. Now you can get craft beer at Publix and it's available at so many other restaurant concepts. So it's become so popular and widely distributed. So the craft beer space, of course, looks very different today than it did for much of the brand's history. But one of the significant shifts for us was creating the cocktail program that we have now. And that really started when we noticed a significant shift in consumer preferences. Cocktails rose in popularity, particularly about 10 years ago. So directionally as a brand at the time, that was a big change for us because for so many years, we were mainly focused on pizza and beer.
Excellent. Now, COVID did some funny things that were really helpful to restaurants. So many states allowed restaurants to serve cocktails out the door in sealed containers and all those things. And
Yeah.
I'm sure you took advantage of that at the time. Has that changed in the different locations you have? Can you still do that in your restaurants? Not so
We have
much, though.
that's the tricky thing with liquor laws is really because of prohibition and I call them a lot of the sort of antiquated practices that maybe are still in place today in terms of government regulation that were born out of that prohibition era. That's a challenging thing, especially when you think about multi-unit, because oftentimes there's different rules and stipulations wherever that restaurant is, and there's not as much national consistency as there is directly in the food space. We have some restaurants in certain markets where off-premise cocktails and LBW sales are still permitted and they still have active programs offering that. But I would say in terms of the overall programming from COVID that really stuck and we think is here to stay. I
Sure.
think we're not unique like many other concepts where we think that saw a spike in popularity for a period of time, but it wasn't as sticky as some of the other behavioral changes that we've seen.
Terrific. Let's shift
Mhm.
gears again. Let's talk about retail merchandise because that's an additional profit center. And I've always believed you can't have too many profit centers in a restaurant. You're not just selling food and drinks,
Yeah.
but that's the whole package. But in order to have a successful retail program, you need a strong brand. What are the
Right.
keys to starting a retail program? And how would you advise our audience to create one if they don't have one?
So we have at Mellow Mushroom, our employees all wear our cool psychedelic trippy t-shirt. We change signs very frequently. So in our case, oftentimes the products sell themselves
Yes,
because
I
guests
see
see
that.
the employees wearing them and they love them and they ask to purchase them.
Uh,
Of course, have certain markets that are tourist driven markets where, merchandise sales are naturally higher there because people in that area are looking to purchase those types of things. So locations that are in tourist markets certainly take advantage of those differences. We have a lot of operators, though, that do it differently. We have some that have full merchandise displays in their restaurants. The most important thing there, is making sure that you keep it freshly stocked and maintained. There's just like keeping your bathrooms clean. We talk about that as operators a lot. There's certain kind of visual indicators in a restaurant that send immediate signals to guests. And so there's
Very
nothing.
true.
And you walk to a
Impressions.
restaurant and they're like, yeah, we sell t-shirts and there's two kind of sad ones hanging there on the display. So first and
Yes.
foremost, if you're going to do it right, like anything else.
Let me
So
ask you one question, and I'm sure it varies store to store. What's that whole Disneyland theory? It's like you can't
right,
walk into the park without going through 10 different retail boutiques, and you can't
right,
leave the park. So it's key to have it highly visible, first and last impression at the entrance,
right.
but not just a t-shirt or two hanging on the wall. It's like a merchandise retail center, but then that takes square footage. What's the balance?
We have the balance for us is that it's an optional program. So we don't necessarily believe that having a strong retail presence is right for every single
Okay.
Mellow Mushroom restaurant. So it's based on some of the market conditions that I described. It's also based on the fact that you need to have a franchisee and an operator who believes in it, is invested in it, and wants to maintain that active presence in their restaurant in terms of the display. So there's a little variation there in terms of those that are selling retail and not selling it. But the other thing that I would say today is really important if you are, as a brand, not talking about just individual operators, but as a brand, if you want to be invested in this space, is there are so many different partners out there that are available today that will work with you directly on helping to maintain this program. So in our case, we have a great provider that helps us to manage our online website and all of the inventory there and all of the products that are there. They have a team that works to make sure those products in terms of their manufacturing practices are ethical and safe, that things that we're making, the materials involved in those items, they have a very extensive QA process involved in that. So especially with so much of the production of these things happening overseas, I think one of the great ways to think about the retail program is that it's really an advertising tool for your brand. So if it's not something that you can spend a lot of time and energy on, because you're probably, with the complexities of owning and operating a restaurant today, you probably have your time completely tied up in other areas. You can work with a great partner that's going to help manage this for you, and they know exactly how to do it. They're going to provide a great experience to your guest. They're going to help advise you on different promotional tactics and things that you can do to help grow the program and develop a digital presence. For us, we have so much of things are online. So now we have our Mellow Mushroom shop that's also available online that allows us to collaborate with other influencers and partners, that allows us to send out promotional elements where someone can just click online to shop. So I think inside the restaurant and both online are important when you think about developing a robust retail offering that you can use to help promote a lot of the other activities of your organization.
So is that all collective in terms of the fulfillment? You got an online store and there's one place that handles the fulfillment of all this, and you're always in stock on inventory and there's no back orders and all that? Because that's a challenge. I'm absolutely in belief that you can sell stuff live in your locations, but having an online store was hugely important. There are certain logistical challenges, of course, but you can start small, have someone in charge of the whole program if you have one single location. I'm a big believer in empowerment. So you pick someone that's a go-getter that wants to move up in the organization, start a retail program. I'll look at everything you've got, but I trust in your judgment, your ability to believe our brand and translate that to the guest. I think that's tremendous.
Exactly. And depending on the size of your brand, a lot of these different providers available, there's options now where you can have, let's say, 4 or 5 t-shirts available on your store, and they're printed on demand with digital printing tactics. So you don't necessarily have to incur inventory overhead, and you can trial and error, see what sticks and see what works. So the industry in terms of retail merchandising has rapidly changed and evolved, and it's evolved in a way that I think really supports small businesses and opportunity to start from the beginning. So you can, I think, right size how you want to handle it and what you want to do based on the operations that you want to incur and what you want to outsource.
Fantastic. Elizabeth, you've given us a real deep dive into branding and positioning and all the things that are so vital to creating a strong culture and translating that culture to your guests and querying and focus groups and really pinpointing what that brand is really all about. It's been super great having you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you again. That was the Restaurant Rockstars Podcast. Thanks to our audience for tuning in. Thank you to our sponsors. We can't wait to see you in the next episode. So please stay tuned and stay well, and we will see you then.
People go to restaurants for lots of reasons. For fun, celebration, for family, for lifestyle. What the customer doesn't know is the thousands of details it takes to run a great restaurant. This is a high-risk, high-fail business. It's hard to find great staff. Costs are rising and profits are disappearing. It's a treacherous road, and smart operators need a professional guide. I'm Roger. I've started many highly successful, high-profit restaurants. I'm passionate about helping other owners and managers not just succeed, but knock it out of the park. I created a game-changing system, and it's filled with everything I've learned in over 20 years running super profitable, super fun restaurants. Everything from creating high-profit menu items and cost controls to staff training where your teams serve and sell, to marketing hooks, money-maximizing tips, and efficiencies across your operation. What does this mean to you? More money to invest in your restaurant, to hire a management team, time freedom, and peace of mind. You don't just want to run a restaurant, you want to dominate your competition and create a lasting legacy. Join the Academy and I'll show you how it's done.
Thanks for listening to the Restaurant Rockstars Podcast. For lots of great resources, head over to restaurantrockstars.com. See you next time.